The house was unusually quiet that evening. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the wall clock, and the occasional creak of the floorboards under Dad's steps were the only sounds filling the living room. I was curled up on the couch with a book I wasn't really reading, my mind drifting between mundane worries and memories of better days. Mom had been busy in the kitchen, humming an old tune she always sang when she thought no one was listening. My sister, normally glued to her phone, was scrolling absent-mindedly at the other end of the room. Everything seemed ordinary, almost peaceful. Dad walked in with a strange energy, a tension I couldn't quite place. He carried the remote like a weapon and paused in front of the TV, as if the screen itself demanded attention. The silence stretched for a moment before he finally pressed the power button. The familiar glow illuminated the room, but the comfort it usually brought evaporated instantly. On the screen was a bank security footage, the grainy video showing a person at an ATM withdrawing money. But it wasn't just any withdrawal. The caption flashing on the screen made my blood run cold. "This is someone withdrawing my $200,000. Do you recognize yourself?" I froze, the book slipping from my hands. My heart hammered, my lungs refusing to cooperate. The words echoed in my mind, repeating like a cruel joke I didn't understand. My sister let out a strangled gasp, the glass in her hand trembling before it clattered to the floor, shattering into pieces. The sound snapped me out of my trance. But the horror didn't fade. Dad's face was pale, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes dark with a mix of anger and disbelief. No one spoke at first. The tension in the room was suffocating. Every tick of the clock felt louder than before, each second stretching longer than the last. I couldn't comprehend how something like this could happen in our home, something so unimaginable. $200,000 wasn't just money. It was our future, the security we had painstakingly built over the years. And now, it seemed, someone we trusted had taken it. My mind raced through everyone I knew, everyone I loved, searching for a hint of guilt or a telltale expression. But the harder I searched, the emptier the room felt. The betrayal didn't just sting, it cut deep, a sharp twist of disbelief that left me shaking. My sister's eyes darted around the room, wide and fearful, as if the walls themselves might hold the answer. The shattered glass at her feet seemed symbolic of everything we had thought was solid and safe, broken in an instant. Dad finally broke the silence, his voice low but trembling with fury. Someone in this house did this, someone we trusted. His gaze swept over us, lingering longer than it should have, like a spotlight on guilt itself. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, trying to keep my thoughts from betraying the storm of emotions inside. Fear, confusion, disbelief, and an almost unbearable hurt collided inside me. How could someone look us in the eye every day and betray us so completely? As I watched my family, the cracks that had always been there, the quiet jealousy, the small lies, the moments of envy and resentment, suddenly seemed like ominous signs, tiny shadows hinting at this moment. And yet, nothing could have prepared me for the sight of that video, the knowledge that our life of trust and normalcy had been violated so fundamentally. The room felt colder, the air heavier, and I realized with a sinking heart that nothing would ever feel safe here again. The first waves of panic began to give way to a cold, sharp awareness. I needed to see the truth. I needed to know who had done this, and deep inside, buried beneath the hurt, a quiet ember of something else started to glow. Anger. A dangerous, burning kind of anger that whispered that betrayal would not go unanswered. The sound of the police sirens outside was deafening in comparison to the suffocating silence that had settled over the house. Dad opened the door before they could knock again, his hands trembling just slightly, betraying the calm he was trying to project. I followed him into the small entryway, my mind spinning faster than my feet could carry me. Each step felt like walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My sister stayed behind in the living room, picking up shards of glass with shaking hands, her face pale and drawn. The officers stepped inside, polite but firm, their eyes scanning the room as if already weighing the invisible tension that hung like a heavy fog. One officer, A woman with sharp eyes and a voice that carried authority without harshness began asking questions immediately. Who discovered the withdrawal? When did you notice the money was missing? Her tone was neutral, but the weight of the situation pressed down on us like a physical force, Dad explained, his voice wavering only once. I noticed it yesterday when reviewing my accounts. At first, I thought it was an error, but then the footage came through. This is someone we know. His words hung in the air, a declaration that sliced through the fragile sense of family we had been clinging to. The questions continued, each one more invasive, more scrutinizing. Who has access to your accounts? Has anyone expressed dissatisfaction or frustration lately? Are there any recent conflicts in the family? I could feel my heart hammering against my ribcage. The officer's presence was meant to bring order, yet it only magnified the chaos already simmering inside the house. My mind kept circling, replaying faces, voices, smiles, laughter, all now suspect. My sister finally spoke, her voice a fragile whisper that barely reached anyone beyond the living room. It can't be anyone here, she said, though even she didn't sound convinced. Her words hung in the air like a fragile shield, a desperate attempt to cling to normalcy. But Dad's eyes, dark and tired, betrayed something else. A shadow of doubt passed between us silently, unspoken yet undeniable. Trust was crumbling like the glass she had dropped minutes earlier. Hours passed in a haze of questions, explanations, and uneasy silences. The police took notes, asked to see our bank statements, and requested a copy of any security footage we had. Every detail they examined seemed to push a knife a little deeper into our hearts. I couldn't look at my sister without feeling the gnawing suspicion that maybe, just maybe, the betrayal had come from someone I had loved blindly. The officers finally left, promising to investigate further and reminding us not to confront anyone directly until they had more information. The moment the door closed behind them, the house felt hollow. The quiet was no longer peaceful. It was mocking. Dad sank into the armchair, rubbing his face with his hands, while Mom stood by the kitchen counter, staring blankly at nothing. I paced the room, trying to digest what had just happened. My emotions were raw, frayed, and uncontainable. Grief, anger, fear, and that slow-burning ember of revenge that had started to grow in Chapter 1. I couldn't stop thinking about the betrayal. Someone had taken $200,000 from us. Someone who knew us. Someone who had trusted smiles, hugs, and family dinners without hesitation. It wasn't just the money. It was the violation, the theft of faith in the people who should have been untouchable in my heart. And as the adrenaline of shock began to fade, it left behind clarity. I couldn't rely on anyone else to uncover the truth. If justice was going to happen, I would have to be the one to see it through. That night, as the house finally fell into uneasy silence, I sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker against the darkened sky. My mind replayed every small detail, every fleeting glance, every conversation over the past months that might hint at the thief. I didn't know who it was yet, but I knew this. I would find out. And when I did, the betrayal would not go unanswered. The days that followed were unbearable. Every glance at my sister, every casual conversation with my parents felt like walking on a minefield. Trust had been shattered, replaced by a constant, gnawing suspicion. I tried to go about my routine, school, chores, small errands, but my mind refused to settle. I replayed the security footage over and over in my head, searching for a clue, a detail I might have missed. Who could move through our home with such ease and take something so valuable without leaving a trace? The answer tormented me. I began watching my sister more closely, noticing tiny inconsistencies I had never paid attention to before. The way she avoided certain questions, the subtle hesitation before answering, the nervous glances at the computer or her phone. Nothing obvious, but enough to make my gut tighten. I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't let suspicion turn into accusation without proof. Yet every instinct screamed that the betrayal was closer than I wanted to admit. Late one night, unable to sleep, I dug through the house quietly, looking for anything unusual. It wasn't about catching her in the act, at least not yet. It was about gathering evidence, understanding the truth before confronting anyone. I discovered small things that didn't make sense. A forgotten receipt from an ATM I didn't recognize, a hidden envelope tucked behind her dresser, a subtle change in behavior that suddenly felt meaningful. Each discovery, though minor on its own, combined to form a picture I couldn't ignore. The realization hit me like a cold wave. This wasn't just a reckless act, it was calculated, deliberate, and personal. I began to remember moments I had dismissed before, how she had questioned Dad about our finances more than necessary, how she sometimes lingered near his study, pretending to be casual. Memories of laughter and shared secrets now felt tainted, as if every smile had been masking intent. The betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about trust, intimacy, and love. Everything we had assumed was safe within our family walls. Anger surged, but it was tinged with sorrow, a sorrow that cut deeper than rage because it came from someone I had loved. I started to plan, carefully, methodically. This wasn't going to be a moment of blind revenge. It had to be precise, undeniable, a revelation that would leave no room for denial. I documented everything: the receipts, the hidden accounts, the subtle inconsistencies in behavior. I learned to listen without seeming attentive, to observe without drawing attention. It was exhausting, mentally and emotionally, but it also sharpened something inside me. The hurt was transforming into clarity, and clarity into resolve. One evening, while pretending to be distracted by homework, I noticed her checking her phone with a furtive look, quickly locking it when I glanced her way. My heart raced, not with fear but anticipation. Every small lie, every hidden movement was a thread I could follow, a pathway to the truth. I felt a strange combination of grief and empowerment. I was still hurt, but now I was no longer helpless. The betrayal had given me a purpose, a reason to see things through to the end. The house had changed. It no longer felt safe or comforting, but it had become my arena, the stage on which the truth would be revealed. And somewhere in that tension, a quiet voice inside me whispered, "She might have taken the money, but she hadn't taken everything." I still had my mind, my determination, my ability to act when the time was right. And when the time came, the betrayal would be met not with violence or recklessness, but with a revelation so undeniable, so emotionally powerful, that it would leave no doubt about who had crossed the line and what consequences awaited. The moment finally arrived when I knew I could no longer wait. Months of observation, careful documentation, and silent deduction had led me to one undeniable truth: my sister had taken the money. It wasn't a hasty decision or a lapse in judgment. It was deliberate, calculated, and cruel. And though my heart ached at the realization, a strange clarity had settled over me. I didn't want revenge in the sense of causing harm. I wanted truth, exposure, and justice. I wanted her to see the weight of her betrayal, to feel the loss she had inflicted, not only on Dad and Mom, but on herself. I waited until dinner, when everyone had gathered around the table, the tension between us so thick it could be cut with a knife. My parents were blissfully unaware of the confrontation I had been preparing, believing we were simply trying to recover from the shock of the theft. My sister, however, seemed uneasy, her eyes darting around the room more than usual. She didn't know I had already gathered everything: the ATM receipts, screenshots of her online transactions, and even a subtle video I had recorded of her sneaking into Dad's study. I began calmly, almost conversationally. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. My parents looked up, puzzled, while my sister froze, her fork clattering against her plate. "About the money, about trust, about family." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. She tried to look indifferent, but I could see the small twitch of panic at the corner of her eye. "I know who took it," I continued, each word deliberate, measured. "And I know why you thought no one would find out. But hiding things only makes the truth heavier when it comes out." I placed the evidence on the table one by one: the receipts, the screenshots, the small video clip. My parents gasped, and my sister's face went pale, her lips parting as if to protest, but no sound came. What? How? Dad stammered, his voice a mixture of shock and disbelief. My sister finally spoke, her voice trembling, small and fragile. I I didn't mean to. She started, but I interrupted, not with anger, but with cold clarity. You didn't mean to? You took $200,000 of our life, of Dad's hard work, and you call that not meaning to. Do you understand what this does to us? To me? Tears welled in my eyes, but they were a mixture of grief and determination, not weakness. For the first time, she truly saw the weight of her actions. The betrayal wasn't just numbers on a screen, it was a fracture in trust, a wound in the family that could have been permanent. I let the silence stretch, forcing her to confront it, forcing my parents to see it clearly as well. And then I said the words that marked the turning point. We're going to fix this. You'll return what you stole, and we'll involve the authorities if necessary. But more importantly, you'll understand that actions have consequences and that family isn't something you can take lightly. The relief I felt wasn't sweet or triumphant. It was quiet, a soft exhale after holding my breath for months. She cried, confessing everything, explaining her motivations, and, in the process, beginning the slow repair of what had been broken. Dad's hands shook as he took the documents and receipts, the weight of betrayal still heavy but beginning to lift with accountability. Mom simply held her head in her hands, sobbing quietly. By the end of the night, the tension had shifted. The money issue was far from over. We would involve the authorities to ensure restitution, but the emotional victory was mine. The betrayal had been faced head-on, the truth exposed, and justice set in motion without losing my integrity. Sitting in my room later, I reflected on what had happened. Anger had transformed into clarity, grief into resolve, and betrayal into understanding. I realized that while trust could be broken, it could also be rebuilt with honesty, courage, and accountability. The ember of revenge I had felt all those months had never been about hurting her. It had been about reclaiming control over my life, my family, and my sense of justice. And now, as I looked at the night sky through my window, I finally felt it. The quiet, enduring satisfaction of having faced betrayal, sought truth, and emerged stronger than I had ever been.